Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
It's going well, Lindsay. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I just tested out my first kickboxing class this morning, so that was a fun adventure to try to figure out. Lots of punching, kicking. My shoulders are so sore. I think I'm gonna have to bow out of taking notes this episode.
You know it's a good workout if you can't actually hold your arm to write notes, right? So
Exactly.
I have a really important question for you, though. So I know last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, you tried a bar class. Which one do you like more? Do you like kickboxing or do you like bar better?
I think that they're both really different. So I don't know that there's like one I like, fully more than the other. I would say bar has a lot more like pulsing and you're sitting there thinking, holy crap, this hurts so bad, I want to die. Whereas kickboxing, it was like over so fast. Like we were done and we were like going to stretch. And I was like, wait, we definitely have like 20 more minutes. Like there's no way we're done with this. It just went by really fast. So I think that they're just different classes.
That's the way I felt with cardio tennis. Like, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted, but the time went by so quickly. So if I'm trying to choose between the two, I think kickboxing might be the one for me to try. What do you think?
Well, I think you should try it out. That sounds like good.
Yeah.
Good, like a good plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, today, here's the thing. And that's really funny because you say that all the
Here's
time.
the thing. Wow, it's rubbing off. I love it.
We have two agencies since I joined Agency Focus, which hasn't been that long, just over a month, that have come to us needing kind of internally of the team of what we call like a rapid valuation. Like we move them to the front of the line. And for anyone listening to this, we don't do that often. It's really in those emergency situations because it's unfair to other agencies, but we're doing it because the agency owner has passed away and their family doesn't work in the agency and has no idea what to do. So we step in and help in those situations to help that poor family figure out through their grief, what's going on and what to do. So I think a really important topic on all agency focused staff right now is perpetuation planning and making sure at the very least you have some sort of plan put together for your family. So I'd love that to be our topic today. As morbid as it is to think about, I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah. I have to say, Lindsay, it's when I started doing this work, I thought to myself, I am going to feel like I've made an impact on the industry and people I really care about if I can change two things. Number one, I think every single agency owner should have a written, documented perpetuation plan, even if it's not fully complete. Like you should have as much as you can get documented to protect the people that love you. I mean, and protect the people that work for you and your clients that depend on you. It's just so sad when you get that call and you know that time passing is going to cause that agency to decline in value because people get nervous. Your clients get nervous, your staff gets nervous, carriers can get nervous, referral partners can get nervous. I mean, the uncertainty creates a decline in value, and it's terrible to watch. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is I want everybody to, know what their profitability is and know what drives the value of their agency. If you're going to have something that's so valuable, you need to know what that is. And I went as far as to say everybody would know their EBITDA. I think maybe if I could just say know what drives the value, that would be great. But the number one is if we can get everybody to have something documented, man, I feel like that would be a great impact because when we get these calls, it just is gut wrenching. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. It really is. So I think it's a great topic. Let's dive into it. And I will tell you, if you wait until something happens and people have to make quick, fast decisions with uncertainty and grief as part of the mix. It's just hard to navigate through. It's hard to navigate through no matter what, and add grief and uncertainty. And it just, my heart breaks for people that are facing this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as a business owner yourself,
Mhm.
what is the reason that you wouldn't have a perpetuation plan?
I think, first of all, people have their head down and they're working in their agency. Like they're working on building, not thinking about the end. I mean, human nature is such that we don't want to think about when we're not going to be here, and it's easy to push it aside and say that doesn't apply to me. And I think that's true. Anytime you have a health issue that comes up, you never think it's going to happen to you. I'm guilty of that myself. So I think number one, it's hard to think about. Number two, it seems like something that's not urgent until it becomes a catastrophe. And the third thing is, for some agency owners, they don't know what the plan should be. They don't have someone in mind. So you're asking them to do something that they don't want to think about, that doesn't seem like it's anytime soon. And honestly, they're not sure who they would trust with that. And the last thing I would say is, if you don't have a successor in mind and you don't have anybody inside your organization that is a potential successor, you get stuck and then you don't move forward. And hopefully through this conversation, we could talk about thinking about that in different ways. And the last thing is, it's overwhelming. Even taking a bite of this step feels overwhelming. I remember
Mm-hmm.
when our family, putting together our wills and our trust, felt the same way. Like there's so much to think about. It's almost like I can't start it because I know I can't finish it. So therefore you freeze. Same thing. I think if you can think about this in steps, it makes it a whole lot easier. But the biggest inhibitor is fear. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to contemplate when I'm not here. It's easy to push aside, and therefore it never happens.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, what happens if you don't have one? Does the responsibility normally fall on the agency owner's family? Does it fall on the staff? What happens here?
So typically people have a will, and in there it describes what happens to everything that they own and all of their assets. So if you have a
So, a
spouse,
business would be included in that.
typically, yeah. So
Got it.
but the challenge with that, even in the two situations we have right now, so one is we're helping a wife whose her husband passed away, and she's never worked inside the agency, and it now is she is the owner of the agency by default. They're married. They have, it's a common asset. She's not licensed. She's never run that business. She's in a completely different industry. The staff know her and like her and trust her. Like, don't get me wrong, but there's a period of time that she has to get this done. But the reason they go to the top of the list is, as time moves on, the staff starts to think about, well, am I even going to have a job? If this agency is going to sell, do I want to even stay here? Like, what is that going to look like? I have no idea who the potential buyer is. I know that she's probably not going to run the agent. You know what I mean? Like there's only so much time. And then if you lose key staff during this transition, that changes the continuity in those relationships with your customers by the time you do identify a potential buyer. So time is of the essence. It's a race against the clock in many cases in order to get your arms around what that might look like. So typically the asset goes to family, a next of kin, a spouse, potentially the children. So the second situation we're dealing with is, there's a spouse who's distraught, obviously, and both of these were unexpected deaths, and the daughters are actually engaging with us to help their mother work through the challenge. and
Hmm.
and both cases, the data's not ideal. Like that, the other thing is, like, if you're not ready and you're not running your agency
Yeah.
like you're selling it tomorrow, there's even more challenges trying to get your arms wrapped around what do we even have here. So, and anyway, but to answer your question, it typically goes to next of kin. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's not the staff burden, it's actually burden on your family who's grieving the most.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Everybody's
That
grieving. Let's
is
be real. Like, listen, if you know it,
everybody's grieving.
yeah, if
Yes.
you know, but I get, the people closest to you that the last thing on their mind is probably trying to, work on a business. They want to work on each other and they want to,
Mhm.
they, or
Right.
nothing at all. Like they just want to focus on the fact that, they miss whoever their loved one is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about what a perpetuation plan actually is.
Mhm.
I'm a visual person, so I need to like see it in order to do it, but let's talk about that a little bit. What are things typically included in a perpetuation plan?
Yeah, so that can look and feel different inside any business. And I think you should think about it in two ways. A perpetuation plan should outline what someone's should do, who should they call, how do they handle it, when do they handle it, what do they need to do based on a specific number of triggering events. So think about it this way. It should handle the emergency situation if there's a sudden loss of key people or the owner of the agency. Number one, so sudden, what do we do? Who do we call? What do we need to make happen? And also the systematic transfer of the agency when there's not a sudden event, but what's going to happen in the future. A perpetuation plan's purpose is to help this business continue to operate into perpetuity. That's what it means. So there's two different ways to look at what's the emergency plan and what's the systematic plan. And it should include who are the people that are involved in this transaction, whether it's urgent, the emergency plan or systematic. So who are the key people that are involved? Who are the key people that you should contact for advice? Who are the key people that are important inside this agency that um, are stakeholders? So all of those people should be contemplated in this perpetuation plan, either that they're communicated to, that they have first right of refusal in order to purchase the agency, or they need to be addressed in some way if there is a sudden, unforeseen life event that causes a transfer of ownership. In the same way, who are the people that would need to be notified, handled, whatever, contemplated in a systematic transfer of ownership of the
Mm.
agency? And then the last thing is the triggering, not last thing, but the second is who are the people and then how? Like what's causing the transfer of ownership? What is the triggering event? Was there a death? Did someone become disabled? Was there a divorce? Was there a decision like they're just regular retirement that they're leaving, or was there a performance? So there's typically 5 triggering events that are contemplated in an agreement, and then each of those triggering events, how you handle how that purchase is done or that transfer of ownership could change. So, for instance, if there's a death, there could very likely be life insurance there to help fund that transfer. Disability, there could be disability insurance after a period of time that also helps fund it. But many times there is not. So a sudden event, you can't have a plan in place that actually impedes the ability of that agency to continue to operating from a financial standpoint if it's going to be paid out the same way as if there's a sudden death and there's life insurance. So you say who, you say what the triggering events are, and then you talk about how that transfer could happen. And it has to cash flow. It has to be able to be implemented appropriately. And then for the systematic transfer, you could also have a time factor in there. Like, is it upon age 72, or is it upon whatever? Like, is there a point in time where we're going to do a systematic transfer? But those are the key components of what you would put in there. And some of them I touched on, like, are there funding opportunities for each of these triggering events, and then what are the tax implications for each of these triggering events. So you can hear, you asked me a very simple question, and I then gave you a lot of things to think about, and it becomes very overwhelming. So I would give advice to someone to say, whatever you know, jot it down. Whatever the things are that are unknown, start to discern what you might do in each of those situations, and start taking bites at the apple rather than thinking about it all at once. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you just summarize that
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
in, what are the things that someone needs to think about
So,
in like a summary bullet point
yeah, I
form?
think the way I think of it is almost like the directional signs, like who, how, when, what, and um, is real. If you can answer who's involved, how will it transfer, what do they need to do, and when will it happen, I think you can
Mhm.
start getting to this. And actually, we've built a tool to help step someone through those questions and mapped out what those triggering events are. So you could say, who has first right of refusal? If you don't have the who, I told you that's one of the things, like, well, I don't know who it is. So now I can't
Right.
write a plan because I don't have a who. You know, I've worked with a fair number of agencies that didn't have a who. They did not have a successor, or they didn't have someone that was ready. They might have someone in mind, but we don't know if they're ready or not. So what they've done is think about, who are other agency owners that I would trust to support my
Mm.
family, and therefore we can capitalize on their knowledge, and they can be an advisor to people that don't have the experience, knowledge, or um, ability to step through all the decisions they need to make. So if you don't have a successor, then think about who can advise the people that will be left facing these decisions, and how can you best position them to know how to navigate those decisions. The other who's is, who's your accountant? Who are your key people that you need to make sure you notify
Like a
and
contact
calm them
list.
down during that? Yeah, exactly. So create
Mhm.
that contact list so no one's trying to search for it. You now know where they are. One of the who's that was really important in an agency that called me, they felt like they didn't really need a perpetuation plan because they had three owners. So if something happened to any one of them, there was two other people that could step in. And in their mind, it wasn't as important to have a perpetuation plan for whatever reason, but that in their mind was comforting to say, hey, we have three owners. Well, the owner that passed away was the one that handled all of their payroll. And the other two didn't know how to log into that system and make that happen.
That's rough.
Didn't know how to do any of the commission reconciliation. They didn't do any operational work. That was his role completely. And it was devastating for many reasons, but just basic blocking and tackling, they weren't sure how to do because they hadn't cross trained each other, and they honestly didn't even know the logins. Like that's what I mean. So write down who all the people are, write down all your bank account informations. What are the websites for your carriers and who are the logins? Like, what are all your passwords? What are your systems? Because if your spouse has not been inside your business and they have absolutely no idea what systems you use, they're going to take a while to get their arms around what's happening here. So
Mhm. Yeah.
make the contact list. And if you can identify someone to help your family through the decisions they're going to have to face, and it's someone you trust, put that in place in advance. We did this for an agency that was part of a network, and they identified a reciprocal agreement between agency owners that said, if something happens to me and my family has to navigate this, I trust you to do it, all the way down to, we'll pay you a fee in order to help my agency for the period of time to get my agency ready to sell. And in one instance, it was, you have first right of refusal. And if you choose not to buy the agency, we'll pay you a fee to help navigate it and help for an external sale. Like, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. So in many ways, don't think about it if you don't have the successor identified, or you don't know who the agency is that you want to sell to, that's fine. But do you trust someone to help your family navigate that decision? Might be an easier question to ask yourself. And
Mhm.
they might be thrilled when you reach out to them to say, hey, man, I'll do that for you too. Like, we'll actually help each other. The other thing I'll
Yeah.
tell you, Linz, is that person that you would trust might not be in the business 5 years from now. Like, if you're both contemplating it, one might retire before the other. You have to
It's
look at a
true.
perpetuation plan as a living, breathing document. So you might revisit it every single year, like January 1st, pull out your perpetuation plan. Who are the people listed? Did anybody change? You can't think about it as a one and done. You have to think about it as it's a living, breathing document that I'm going to update on a regular basis um, until the end of time. Right. So,
Totally.
yeah, hopefully that's
I think
helpful.
a network is probably a really good place to start, but I imagine as a spouse, like I don't think like I think the idea from outside the industry of a network is probably really weird. Like I think about my fiance Patrick, his work. I would have no clue. I mean, he doesn't own the business, but I would have no idea who to reach out to or this random group that he's a member of. Like I would have no idea where to go, but um, I think your network should definitely be on your contract
Yeah,
list
of
of,
course.
or your, sorry, not contract list, your contact list
Hmm.
of people to reach out to, probably near the top, because not only if you actually don't have a plan can most networks help your agency run for a while, but they're going to know plenty of agency owners who are looking to acquire
Sure.
that would do that transaction quickly in your
Well,
area.
and typically you build really strong relationships with other agents within that network, and you get to know their culture and how they deal with their family and their customers, and you might trust them to help advise your family through that process. I mean, goodness gracious, any support you can give to someone. We're gonna release a case study, and we've had her on the podcast. But there's a young woman who we interviewed, and her father passed away. She hadn't been in the agency for very long, and her first call was to the head of the network that he helped founded, and a really close family friend that then became her advisor, and they were able to maintain ownership of that agency. But without those people advising her, it would have been a really hard task. I mean, dealing with the loss of your father, your own grief, your mother's grief, your sister's grief, and being new to the industry, it would have been a lot. And so, while, I that wasn't documented, she knew to call that person because she knew what they meant to her father. And what a gift that was. What an incredible gift. So if you can document that for someone, maybe they're a private person, they don't talk about their work as much, and they wouldn't know who those people are, but document it, let them know. And what a
Absolutely.
what a what a game changer that can be in that process, right? Because otherwise, she might have just said, "This is too much. I need to sell the agency." And in her case, she's flourishing. Like, it's been,
Yeah.
what a gift. So,
Yeah. And she'll actually be in our case study that's coming out on Wednesday this
yeah,
week.
yeah,
So, good timing for this podcast.
yeah,
So, as we wrap up here, I think, we talked about what an ideal perpetuation plan might be. But for someone who is kind of at that freeze stage, what's the bare minimum
yeah.
that you recommend? Just Google Doc, write it down, save it as, open this if something goes wrong.
So honestly, I told you this is like a passion project for me. I would love, love, love for everyone to have this. So we actually have a free tool that steps you through the questions that you can start writing your plan out and thinking through the things that you need to think about. So at a minimum, download it, write it down, and then talk to a lawyer, because your perpetuation plan can look like the operating agreement of your agency. It could look like a buy sell agreement with someone that you've identified. It can look the actual contract or document can look different based on where you are in your process. But it steps you through what list should you make? Like, what are the things that you should put together? What are the things who are the people and names you should identify? What are the triggering events and what are the things that you should think about? I think at a minimum, start with that free resource and start there and then talk to people about it. Surround yourself with someone that can talk to you about, what kind of price are you going to put on each of these triggering events? If it's an internal, how are you going to contemplate that? The agency I just told you about that had 3 agency owners, they used to joke with me and say, hey, at some point we need to get our valuation done, or at some point we need to do that. And I would laugh that every time I saw them at an event, they would, joke about it, but they never did it. Well, the challenge was the agency owner's wife, that of the one that passed away, they faced, is she going to trust the valuation for the agency that we come up with at this point? So get a valuation done of your agency before it's an emergency. Like, it's another reason. It can help inform how much life insurance you should have in the event of death. It can help you step through this process. But for them, luckily, she knew enough about the association that I worked at the time, which is how I met them, and felt comfortable that they suggested someone that she had heard the name of before. But had that not happened, I mean, they were starting at ground zero in trying to navigate this. So, please, there's resources out there. Don't let it go. Take a bite of the apple and then think about, how can I make it better every single year? How can I make sure that at least someone's not scrounging around and trying to figure out where to start? Give them as much information to start with as possible, even if you don't have all the answers. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that I'm probably joining on to this passion project, and hopefully more agencies will be creating their perpetuation plan this year, because this is an incredibly important topic. And it's not even just creating one, it's reviewing it on almost an annual basis to make sure it's still up to date and accurate.
Yeah. I got to tell you, if we could minimize the number of people that call us with this level of urgency, I feel like we're helping people significantly, and not just the people that are calling us, but their clients, their staff, their, having a perpetuation plan puts people at ease. They have a path forward. We're not shooting in the dark. It's not going to be an indefinite amount of time. It's still a very, very difficult time, but at least someone has a pathway. And that can be comforting to many people that are a part of this process. So yeah, we've barely scratched the surface. And I will put a disclaimer here. We're not lawyers. Once you have this documented, you take it to a lawyer and get it documented and get it in the right agreements that make the most sense. But I can't think of something more important that you should do as a business owner to protect the people you love. And I can't think of a better way to protect the asset that you've worked so hard to build.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's about all we have today, unless there's anything else you think is important you want to stick in here.
No, I just think, why don't we in the show notes put the link to the free, it's free, like it's 100% free. Yep. You can download it. You can start contemplating and thinking about this for your own agency. I think that's the best thing that we can do. And if someone has more questions, they can certainly call us anytime. But I think if you do anything, like, take it and at least think about your business. And, the last thing I would say, Lindsay, is people ask me all the time, what's the biggest risk factor inside an agency? This is it. Not having a plan is the fastest way an agency sells at a discount. So please, please, please don't let that happen to you.
Yes. Well, we hope all of you guys have an amazing rest of your Tuesday if you're listening on the day this drops. And we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.